Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the Zoom. I definitely appreciate the ability to be here. I want to thank Hannah and Rabbi Shor and the OU for providing this opportunity for us to be together a little bit. This is my third session on these Chizuk Zooms. 2 weeks ago, we spoke about the initial shock and perspective on what it means to be fighting a war at all, which most of us have never done in this way, and all of us, I think, were caught unexpectedly, the war. Last week, we looked a little bit at the Tehillim, Kuf Chaf Aleph, which we're saying, Esainai Elarim, which is a very beautiful Tehillim, which we analyzed last week and looked at the different nuances within that Mizmor and saw how it affects, I think, and relates to the what we're really experiencing today. What I want to do today with you, with your permission, is to pivot into a refocus on some more in-depth Talmud Torah, which is part, I think, of the Chizuk of what we're focusing on right now. I am about to actually go to Chutz La'aretz. It was not clear until yesterday whether I would be traveling or wouldn't be traveling. One of the pivots of my traveling has shifted somewhat from being a pure recruiting mode to very much a mechazek mode, giving chizuk to the communities in Chutz La'aretz, who are also reeling in many different ways, not in the same way as in Israel, but in their own different ways, with the lack of security that they're feeling, with the enormous pro-Hamas protests going on. And I'm going to be talking a little bit to communities all over in England and in America, which means that I won't be with you for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I really, really hope that by the time I get back in the middle of November, I'll be able to walk up to the Shtender in the OUisrael Center and give a shir in the normal way, Be'ezrat Hashem, and hopefully I'll be able to see you then. But we'll see how things move on. For now, what I want to look at is the Mitzvat Hayom. Meaning, one of the things that people are encouraging us to do, the Torah encourages to do in times of crisis, is to deepen our connection to Torah and mitzvahs. And we all have the mitzvahs that we do on a regular basis, which we need to think about more and have more kavanah and make our brachas with more understanding, etc. And as I explained last week, the idea of hashgacha pratis in most of the Rishonim really works on that basis, that the deeper and the broader our connection is in our own understanding of God, then the wider the channel is for hashgacha pratis to come down to us. It's something which is, we have to earn, if you like, our hashgacha pratis, and therefore we do that by having the maximal connection to God in the way that we possibly can, through mitzvot. And critically here, and this is for the parashas coming up in the next few weeks, through our connection with Klal Yisrael and with the people of the world generally. It's difficult to connect with God in a direct way. One of the most poignant questions at the beginning of Parshas Vayera, the most pressing questions coming up in a couple of weeks, is why does Abraham break off his nevuah, his God has come to meet him in Elonim Mamre, and he is having this one-on-one interface with God. What could be a more meaningful connection with God than that? And yet he breaks off. And he breaks off, and then unfortunately I explained that he says to God, like, I'm going to put you on hold, and I'm going to deal with these travelers, I'm going to do hachnasas orchim. And we learn from that, Gedola hachnasas orchim mihakbalat pnei hashchina. We learn that hachnasas orchim is even greater. Looking after those who need us is even greater than facing the Shekhinah. And the question is, how did he know that? How did Abraham work that out for himself? He had to work everything out for himself. Being an Abraham Jew means you have to work it all out for yourself. No one's there to teach you. And one of the answers that I heard from my own Rosh Hashiva, Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz, is that connecting with other people is a much more intense way of connecting with God, because every single person is a Tzelem Elokim, especially when we're connecting with Klal Yisrael, who are part of one neshama altogether. That connection with God is not broken off by dealing with somebody and giving them hachnasas orchim, but it's actually deepened and made much more meaningful by that. So when we talk about the mitzvahs hayom, we have to think about not just how that connects us with God, but how that connects us with other Jews, other people, in improving the world and thereby connecting with God in a much more meaningful way. The mitzvah I specifically want to focus on today, which is, I think, the mitzvah sayom that we don't often get the chance to do, and we can now take advantage of in this. We didn't ask for this opportunity, but now it is an opportunity, is the mitzvah of Milchemet mitzvah. What is a Milchemet mitzvah? We are in the middle of fighting a war right now. That war is unquestionably a Milchemet mitzvah. I want to just try and understand with you over the next 25 minutes or so, what is a Milchemet mitzvah, what that means for us, and how we are to relate it to the things that we're experiencing right now. So let me share my screen with you. Let me see. Can you share my screen? Can you see my screen there? Is that good? Hannah, give me a thumbs up. Good. Excellent. Thank you. So again, I will actually put this on the chat. Let me do it before I share the screen. I did email it also to Hannah so that she will be able to email it to anybody who wishes. But I will actually pop it on the chat right now. It doesn't always work for everybody, but whoever it works for, that's great. So that just went on the chat right now. Okay, so let's have a look at this together. There are not many sources. This is not an in-depth shir. We could give a whole series of 3 or 4 shirim on Milchemet mitzvah. What that means, we only have 20-25 minutes together today, but it should give us an opportunity to have an overview of what's really going on. Number one, the Rambam says, the Torah talks all the time about war, different aspects of war, how we handle war, how we react within a war. The mitzvot of tzniut are learned from the actions of a battlefield, soldier, which is not the subject for today, but there's a lot of aspects of war in the Chumash. But where does it say in the Chumash that there is a mitzvah that we have to go to war? So let's have a look at this. The Rambam says in Hilchot Melachim, Ein hamelech nilcham tchila, meaning the Torah says you're not really allowed to go to war unless there is the permission of the Beis Din, the Sanhedrin. We're not a war-making nation. We always seek peace. We're not allowed to just start wars for the purpose of conquest. It needs, if the king feels that there is a need for a war, he has to ask permission from the Beis Din, from the Urim and the Tumim, perhaps, also from the Sanhedrin, if the Urim and Tumim are not there. But there are occasions when the king can actually go to war without permission. It says, a king is only allowed to go out to war if there's a mitzvah, Milchemet mitzvah. Then you don't have to ask permission from anyone, you just do it. So, ve'ezehu Milchemet mitzvah. What is a Milchemet mitzvah? What is a Milchemet mitzvah? So he gives 3 options. So Milchemet shivat amamim. This is the war against the 7 nations that Yoshua fought when we went into the land of Israel. So that's obviously a war that is no longer relevant because those 7 nations no longer exist. Milchemet Amalek, or alternatively a war against Amalek, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes, and ve'ezrat Yisrael miyad sar sheba aleihem, and saving the Jewish people against enemies that come upon them, that attack them. Now, I think it's pretty clear to anybody that what we're involved in right now is exactly that. It's ezrat Yisrael miyad sar sheba aleihem. We were attacked in a way which was unthinkable, and we must now respond to that attack to save Jewish lives, both immediately and in the future. And therefore, it's clear that this is a Milchemet mitzvah. The problem is, though, do we have a melech? Is there a melech that can take us into this Milchemet mitzvah? And here, Rav Kook says something which is quite well known in number 2. Rav Kook, when he was discussing the parameters of a Jewish yishuv and the setting up of a state and what that would mean, Rav Kook, of course, died 13 years before the state was established. But Rav Kook says here in one of his tshuvot, he says as follows: I think it's important for you to see the following. When there is no melech, we don't have a titular king, the roles, the responsibilities of the king vest in the ummah b'klali. The people need leadership. The Jewish people need a leader. That leader de facto, he's going to say, will become the king. That the laws and the obligations and the responsibilities and the rights of the king revest in the entire nation. They don't just disappear. If we don't have one person, we don't have a David or a Shlomo or a Chizkiah or whoever, we have the nation as a whole takes those responsibilities of a king into itself. And when that nation appoints a government, appoints a group of people to lead it, in all the aspects that a king would normally need to lead a nation, al pidat haklal v'dat beit din, which has the approval of the people. And it's interesting, dat beit din, which beit din is he talking about? I'm not sure, I didn't go into it in depth. Is he talking about the general approval of the religious community in the land? In which case, there's no question that certainly vests in the government we have right now. Vadai omedhu bimkom melech. This government, this appointed government that the people have chosen to represent its powers of Malchut, is the halachic melech. Le'inyan mishpatei ha'melucha, that applies to all the rights of the king, or the laws of the king, hanogim lahanhagat haklal, and the way that it conducts the people. And therefore, certainly Rav Kook would say that the war that we are fighting is not just a Milchemet Mitzvah, but we have an actual melech as well. And I think this is a position which is taken by many, that the government of Israel, whether you like this one or don't like this one, and we're not talking about any individual within the government, but the organ of the government of Israel is itself a melech halachically. And in fact, the Ramban says this fairly clearly elsewhere. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says, She'ir elisha mitzvah ala melech, the mitzvah of going to war devolves on the king, or ala shofet, or alternatively on the leader. Maybe there isn't a melech. Before we had Malachim, we had Devorah and Gidon and Ehud, etc. There could be a shofet. Umi sheha'am b'rishutah lahatziyem letzava b'milchama. B'milchemet reshut or mitzvah, excuse me. Or anyone who the country chooses to conduct its army, to lead its army, b'milchemet reshut, either in a milchemet reshut, an optional war, or a milchemet mitzvah. Liot shoel ba'urim utumim va'al pneihem yitneheg ha'inyan. That this it doesn't have to be a melech. It could be a melech, or a shofet, or anyone who the people have vested with responsibility in order to do that. And therefore, many of the commentators, I go so far as to say the vast majority, have understood that all wars that Israel has fought over the last 70 years, 75 years, have been milchemet mitzvah. They've been wars in order to protect the very existence of the Yishuv in Eretz Israel. In 48, 56, 67, 73, there was a big discussion about the war in Lebanon, whether the war in Lebanon in the 80s was included in that, and I'm not getting into that in detail now. But I think we reached a point when we started thinking to ourselves, well, surely we don't anymore need to fight wars which protect the very existence of the Jewish Yishuv in Eretz Israel. Surely we've moved past that. And I think the events of the last few weeks have shown us that we have not moved past that. And therefore the requirement of a Milchemet Mitzvah to just to preserve the very existence of the Jewish state is something that we're involved in now. We'll get on to Amalek in a minute. Rav Soloveitchik had another angle on Amalek, which we'll talk about soon. What does that involve? What does it mean when we're fighting a Milchemet Mitzvah? So I want to bring you a piece from Rav Goren. Rav Goren, I've selected this, in the time that we've got, I can only bring you very small selections. But Rav Goren has an important piece where he teaches as follows in number 4. Shemilchemet Mitzvah hen chova mekudeshet min haTorah. It is fighting a Milchemet Mitzvah is a chova mekudeshet. It is a holy obligation, which is a Torah mitzvah. We'll see in a minute. Where is it explicit in the Torah? What is this mitzvah based on? We'll see in a minute. Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook is going to give us some guidance on that. But it is a sacred obligation. Ha-mitzvah al ha'am, and the mitzvah is on the people, lelo yotze min haklal, without any exception at all. This is never, a Milchemet Mitzvah is never somebody else's war. It's not a war being fought by the army or by the commanders or by the Jews here or in Eretz Israel. It's every Jew's war. Every single Jew in the world is involved in the Milchemet Mitzvah in their own way, lelo yotzeh min haklal, without any exception, says Rav Goren. Limsor et nafsho, and every Jew in his or her own way is required to give over of themselves. For some people that means risking their lives, and for some people that means other investments of themselves, leman hasagat matarata shel milchama, in order to achieve the goals of the war. Lelo hitchashvut im hakarbonot b'nefesh ha'adam shemilchama zot tavi be'ikvoteha. And we cannot allow ourselves to be weakened by the potential cost, God forbid, in life and in mental health and in physical health that can be involved in fighting and achieving our goals in this war. Now, we daven every single day, and we'll daven ourselves in a few minutes, that please God, all of our fighters and all of our soldiers should come back in good health, b'brias hanefesh, b'brias haguf, and they should be back with their families very, very soon. But we all realize that that is not something that we can guarantee, and we have to not be deflected by the fact that there is a cost, and there is a cost to everybody in their own way. That is part of the Milchemet mitzvah. So he goes on. Ein od mitzvah acheret asher bekocha lidchot et kol hamitzvot shel HaTorah, kolel mitzvah pikuach nefesh. There is no other mitzvah you can think of that puts off entirely all other mitzvahs, including pikuach nefesh. Clearly, a soldier cannot argue, well, I have a mitzvah to fight, but I have a mitzvah of pikuach nefesh. Surely I have to protect my own life. No, this mitzvah pushes aside pikuach nefesh. There is no other mitzvah that does that. Como Milchemet halechima, mitzvah halechima, the Milchemet mitzvah. This is a unique challenge that we're facing right now. And in that sense, it's a unique opportunity. This is what I'm trying to tease out of this, that we don't get the chance to do this mitzvah very often. And we don't ask for it, but when some mitzvah we don't particularly want to have to do. There's a mitzvah in the Torah of Gittin, of Gerushin. There's a mitzvah that when it has to happen, husband and wife have to be divorced. We don't ask for that, we don't want that, but when it comes, we must do it properly, and we have to accept that this is part of what the Torah requires. So too, Milchemet mitzvah is a mitzvah we don't pray for, but it's a mitzvah that we take the opportunity to do in every way we can. And then he finishes, mitzvah lechima b'Milchemet mitzvah, chova mekudeshet al kol yachid. It is an obligation on every individual, not just the government. Limsor et nafsho al kach, lelo kol esharut shel hitchamkut. And there is no way anybody should be thinking that they can anyway evade it or avoid it, mi'ikiyuma, from any active role, al yidei shed ba'al taseh. He says, you can't just say, I'll sit back, I won't do anything. I won't help the enemy, but I don't need to help the war effort for the Jew. No, it says there's no option of shev v'al ta'aseh. There's an obligation on every single person of kum v'aseh. Everybody has to step up and do what they can, and everybody has to play to their strengths. To some people, it's supporting the soldiers. To some people, it's supporting the families. To some people, it's supporting their own family. There's so many ways in which the Jewish people have found to express their support, myriad ways. And that is part of this mitzvah of Milchemet mitzvah. The soldiers need morale. In order to give them morale, they need us to give them things. Now, we tend to think that what they need is food because we're Jewish, so we think that what everybody needs all the time is food. They do need food as well, but they need other things as well, not just physically, but also morally and mentally. And therefore, we have to find every way that we ourselves can fight that Milchemet mitzvah, each one in their own home. And as I said before, in the last year, there is no longer a concept of war being somewhere a long way away on a front. The war is in our own homes. The war comes to us. We have to take ourselves to the Milchama and embrace this Milchemet mitzvah in every way we can. Number 5, I just wanted to keep one stage further. Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook has a sikha in which he explains as follows. He says the following: Milchemet mitzvah hi achat mitharyag hamitzvot. Fighting a Milchemet mitzvah is one of the 613 mitzvot. Asher kulam chayavim ba, which everybody, this is mitzvah which everybody is obligated in. Afilu hachatan michedro v'kala michupata. And that's the wording of the Mishnah, Kaloshana Mishnah. The Mishnah says that even though the Chatan and the Kala should be free to have their first time together, to have the Ishana Rishona together, when it comes to a Milchemet mitzvah, that's not the case. People are pulled away to do what they have to do, even the Chatan from the Tish, and even the Kala from the Chuppah. We'll come back to that in a second. Gam nashim shaychot leMilchemet mitzvah kamo she'ahir al kach ha-minchat chinuch. Even the women of the Jewish people are also obligated in Milchemet mitzvah, as the Minchat Chinuch points out, and that's the Lashon HaRambam, is Lashon HaMishnah, the Kala Mechupata. He says, so says Rav Tzvi Yehuda, Rab Matzavenu Achshav Mugdar K'Milchemet mitzvah. I don't know exactly when this was given. I assume it was around the 67 war. Our Matzav right now, and this speaks to our Matzav in 2023, is a Milchemet mitzvah. Hein ledata Ramban, whether it comes to the Ramban, B'yosem Milchemet Kibush Haaretz, even if it comes to the issue of are we able to keep the land and conquer the land and be in charge of the land of Israel through this war? Hein ledata Rambam, or according to the Maimonidean approach, B'yosa Ezrat Yisrael miyad tsar, like we saw just before, that it's saving the Jewish people from an enemy which is attacking us directly. And this mitzvah, he says now, Hanimshechet mitzivui haTorah, this is based upon the fundamental Torah mitzvah of Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. And here really is the key. This is a mitzvah we don't often think of. Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. We may not stand by while Jewish blood is being spilt. We must act. We have an obligation to act. And he says the obligation of Milchemet mitzvah is based on this fundamental bein adam l'chaveiro. And again, this is not just when it comes to saving life, but it comes to all of the things that are necessary in order to promote the ultimate success of saving life. They are included in lo samod al dam re'echa. Then he says, Amnam, nevertheless, ish darka lichvosh ve'ein isha darka lichvosh. He says there are differences between men and women. Men generally, as Chazal say, are the ones that go to battle, and women are generally those that don't go to battle. And he quotes then the Rav David ibn Zimra from the 15th century. The Rav Daz, can't read this here, Ledivrei HaRambam, he wants to explain the words of the Rambam, that maybe even in a Milchemet mitzvah, that the women have to be part of the Milchemet mitzvah, but they have to take a non-frontline role. They have to be supporting the war effort, supporting the troops in every way. He says that's the Radvaz's opinion, that when it says the Kala Mechupata, it doesn't mean that we put it in a combat unit and tell her to fight the terrorists. It means that she supports the war effort. However, the Rav Tzvi Yehuda disagrees. Aval Chidusha, this Chidush, that Kala Mechupata means she's going to be part of the war effort, you don't find this idea in the Mishnah or the Gemara. Rambam, and you don't find this in the Rambam either. Who brings the wording of the Mishnah clearly. And he says, in his view, Barur, and it's absolutely clear to me, Shekavanat HaRambam L'kol Tafkidei HaMilchama. That when it says women have to be involved in the war, it means that every single woman has to do what she is best suited to do, even says Rav Tzvi Yehuda, if it involves a combat role. And in fact, there were women who were unbelievably heroic in the battles in the south of Israel a couple of weeks ago, in killing hundreds of terrorists. And there's been a lot of reporting on that as well. Now, then he says, however, it's not so straightforward. That's the basic halachic framework. The women and men are all obligated to do what each of them can to fight the war. Aval kumuvan, he says, it goes without saying, yesh hora'ot pratiot, there are individual circumstances, lefi matzavei ha'inyanim shel nisyonot u'nichsholot b'tzniut. Says it's not straightforward in every respect having women in combat roles, and this is not the opportunity that I'm going to use to address that. I gave 2 whole shiurim a few years ago, which they're on my website. You can find them on more of the ins and outs of whether women should or should not be integrated into combat units. Let's leave that aside. He said, of course, there are complicated other issues, but in principle, he said, the women and the men are equally obligated in the war. And he says here, there are other tzniut angles of the kashrut tzvai levanot, kaimet sakana shel nefila musarit. And there we have to worry about the ethical issues as well, involved in men and women together in units. But leaving that aside, the principle that we're working with now is that this is a milchemet mitzvah. Every man and every woman has to do what they can in order to fight that war, because, as I said at the very beginning of the sheet, the Rambam says this is a war of Milchemet Mitzvah because it's le'ezrat Yisrael miyad tsar sheba alehem. We are saving the Jewish people from an active enemy that is fighting us. However, I just want to take now to the final idea, which I think is very important. There was a second element of Milchemet Mitzvah, which is Milchemet Amalek. That there is also a mitzvah for every Jew in the Jewish people to be drafted in whatever way they can in Milchemet Amalek. Are we fighting a war against Amalek? And here I want to bring in Rav Soloveitchik, because Rav Soloveitchik picks up, and we'll see a note from Rav Soloveitchik in a minute, in Kol Dodi Dofik, he picks up on the wording of the Rambam, where the Rambam says, in terms of the war against the 7 nations, that's not applicable anymore because we no longer have the understanding of which nations are in which places. There's no longer a purity of the nations as was in the time of Tanakh. There's a principle the Halacha brings that Bach Sancherib, when Sancherib came and took the 10 tribes away, Ubilbel et umot. He mixed up all the nations. We don't have Canaanim and Chivim and Chitim. We don't know who any of those people are. So he says, and therefore the mitzvah to fight against the 7 nations is no longer relevant. But then he says, and so too there's a mitzvah to fight against Amalek. But the Rambam never goes on to say, but of course we don't know who Amalek is now because, principle that all the nations have been mixed up. Why? Why not? Why does the Rambam not say the same thing when it comes to the war against Amalek that he said when it came to the war against the 7 nations? Now, there are other answers to this question, but I want to pick up on Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik wrote these words in 1956 during the Suez campaign. And he says as follows. I'm sorry, it's a bit fuzzy, but you should be able to see it. Divine providence is testing us once again via the crisis that has overtaken the land of Israel. Let it be clearly stated, the matter does not just affect the political future of the land of Israel. The designs of the Arabs are directed not just against the political sovereignty of the state of Israel, but against the very existence of the Yishuv in the land of Israel. They wish to destroy, heaven forbid, the entire community, both men and women, infants and sucklings, oxen and sheep. It's from Shmuel. At the Mizrahi Convention, I cited the view expressed by my father and master of Moshe Soloveitchik of blessed memory, that the proclamation the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation does not only translate into the communal exercise of waging obligatory war against a specific race, but includes as well the obligation to rise up as a community against any people or group that, filled with maniacal hatred, directs its enmity against Knesset Yisrael. When a people emblazons on its banner, "Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel will be no more in remembrance," it becomes thereby Amalek. In the 1930s and 40s, the Nazis, with Hitler at their head, filled this role. They were the Amalekites, the standard bearers of insane hatred and enmity during the era just past. He was writing in 56. Today, their place has been taken over by the mobs of Nasser and the Mufti. If we are silent now as well, I know not the verdict that will be issued against us by the God of justice. Do not rely on the liberal world's sense of equity. Those same righteous liberals were around 15 years ago in the 40s, and they looked with indifference upon the extermination of millions of people. They did not even lift a finger. If, heaven forbid, yet a second spectacle of blood were to take place before their very eyes, it is likely that they would not even lose a night's sleep over it. Very, very powerful words that Rav Soloveitchik wrote in 56 that are absolutely applicable in exactly the same way today. He'd never heard of Hamas, but just put the word Hamas, and also not just Hamas, but all those other groups. People tend to be focused on Hamas, but let's not kid ourselves. There are many other groups peripheral to them that have the same agenda as them, and wiping out one group will not wipe out all of them. And therefore, Rav Soloveitchik is saying, and you can look in your own time at the next source, which basically says we're talking about the group, we're not talking about individual Arabs, he makes clear, as part of the Amaleki nation. The individual Amaleki is no longer known to us, just like the individuals of the 7 nations are no longer known to us. But when a group, as a group, takes on the role of Amalek, they are halachically Amalek. It's important. He's not just giving rhetoric here. He's saying this is a diuk. He's getting this from the wording of the Rambam, like I said at the beginning. That the Rambam says that halachically the war against the 7 nations is no longer relevant, but halachically the war against Amalek is relevant. And he's saying this is how it's relevant. And therefore I want to suggest to you that certainly Rav Soloveitchik would say, and again, not b'derech drush, but b'derech psak, that what we're fighting right now is a milchama against Amalek. and therefore that also has to be mazares us to fight in the Milchemet Mitzvah in a way that we have no illusions that every single person is needed and every single person is vital, and the opportunity to fight the Milchemet Mitzvah is one that we didn't ask for, but which we take now and will fully dedicate ourselves to. So these were just some thoughts, just for 30 minutes or so, on the Mitzvat Hayom. The Mitzvat Hayom, which is Milchemet Mitzvah, and I think this is something that we can take back with us. And when we leave this Zoom and move on to whichever activities we're involved in supporting this effort to succeed in this war, which Be'ezrat Hashem we will do, and very soon. This is something which should propel us, and something which should drive us to do this, and we should have a kavana that I am oisek hineni muchun u'muzuman lekayim mitzvahs aseh min HaTorah of Milchemes Mitzvah. It requires us to be calm and focused and do whatever we can, but there's no less spirit and energy and emotion that goes into it. So hopefully those were some thoughts that maybe you hadn't thought of before. As I said before, the source sheets have been emailed to Hannah, and she is able to send them on to anyone else who wants them. I also shared them on the group just now as well. I'd like to just say a few Tehillim with you. As I say, I won't have an opportunity to do this with you for a few weeks, so I'd like to take that opportunity now. The Tehillim, I will actually reshare the sheet because they're on the sheet in case that's helpful to you. Right now, the Tehillim are the ones that we've been saying, and hopefully, if you remember what we said last week about Tehillim Kuf Chaf Aleph, you can have kavana when we say the different words of these Tehillim. And again, maybe I'll just mention one that I mentioned last week when it says in Pasuk Hey, Hashem Shomrecha, Hashem Tzilcha, God will save you. How? Al Yad Yuminecha, through your right hand. Say the Meforshim, and I brought them last week. Yuminecha is the Chayalim of the Jewish people. They are our Yamin, they are our right hand, and they are what we are referring to in that pasuk when we're davening for success in the war. Shilamalai Seisaine Larim Yan Yavoizri Ezri Mima Doinoi Shom Ose Shomai Varetz Al Yitzen Ladmot Reglecha Al Yanum Shomerecha Hine Lo Yanum Velo Yishan Shomei Yisrael Adonai Shomerecha Adonai Tzilocha Yad Yuminecha Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakecha V'yareach Balayla Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra Yishmar Es Nafshecha Adonai Yishmar Seischa Voecha Mi'atav Yad Olam Shir Hamalois Mimamakim Chasicha Adonai Adonai Shima Bekolin Tienos Necha Kashavos Lekol Tachanunoi Im Avoinois Tishmaya Adonai Mi Yamoid Ki Imcha Slicha Laman Tivarei Ki Visi Adonai Kivsadash Vilidvoi Hoichalt Vilidvaroi Hoichalti Nafshi Adonai Mishomerim Laboke Shomerim Laboke Yachel Yisrael El Adonai Ki Im Adonai HaChesed V'Harbeim Ofadus V'hu Yifte Es Yisrael Mikol Avonosav. We'll say Mishaberach for the Chayalim. I haven't got all the names in front of me that Rabbi Shor had when he read them all out, but I know that many of us, certainly in my own family, we have a son and a son-in-law and a nephew in the IDF right now, and all of you, I'm sure, have family and friends and a broader connection with Klal Yisrael. Let's daven that they should all be successful and come back safely to their families. Mishaberach Avoseinu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov. Hu yivarech et chayalei tzva hagana liYisrael v'kochot habitzachon v'chol ha'ezrachim b'kaf ha'esh ha'omdim al mishmar atzeinu v'arei Eloheinu yitzen Adonai et oiveinu hakamim aleinu nigafim lifneihem HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishmarei mikol tzara v'tzuka mikol nega u'machla v'yishlach baracha v'atzlach b'chol ma'aseh yedeihem yadber soineinu tachteihem v'yatreim b'chetze Yeshua ba'ateret nitzachon ויקוים בהם הכתוב כי אדוני אלוהיכם ההולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם להושיע אתכם ונאמר אמן. Now make a mishaberach for the captives, that we should daven that they should be released fully, not just some of them but all of them, in good health and return to their families. Mishaberach Avoteinu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Yosef Moshe Aaron David Shlomo hu yivarech v'yishmor v'yinsor et achenu Beit Yisrael hashvuyim בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעבורם. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimalei rachamim aleihem, yishmerei mikol tzara v'tzukah mikol nego machla, v'yishlach baracha v'atzlach b'chol ma'aseh yedeihem, yotziei michoshech v'tzal mavet, v'yoshivei meheira lechek mishpachoteihem, v'nomar amen. And now a mishaberach for those who have been injured in the war, wherever they are in the north or the south or in other places in Eretz Yisrael. Mishaberach Avoseinu Abraham Yitzhak Yaakov, Moshe Aaron David Ushlomo Hu Yivarech V'Yirapeh Es Kol HaPetzuim MeHaPiguim uMeHaMilchama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleihim La'achlimam La'arpoisam La'achzikam La'achyoisam V'Yishlach Lahem Meheru Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim L'chol Yivareihim L'chol Gideihem V'Soch Shachol Yisrael Refuas HaNefesh Refuas HaGuf Hashta Ba'agala V'Zman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. Achenu kol beis Yisrael hanusun b'tzara b'shivya ha'omdim bein bayam ubein beyabasha hamakam yirachim aleihem v'yotziei mitzara l'revacha mi'afela le'oira u'mishibud le'geula hashta u'baga'ala u'bizman kariv ve'imru amen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to be with you for a 40 minutes or so. I wish you all and all your families good health, hatzlacha, and bracha in all things. And please God, we should all do what we have to do and do it well. I am very much looking forward to the opportunity to spending some time with the Jews of Chutz La'aretz. I think that we sometimes assume that their job is to give chizuk to us in Israel, and of course it is. But our job, Kol Yisrael, Arevim Zel Hazeh, is to give chizuk to them as well. They're also facing insecurities of different types, and I hope to be able to report back in a few weeks, having been to, I'm going to around 30 different high schools and different communities. So hopefully we'll be able to connect to OUisrael that way as well. Have a wonderful week, and please God, we'll speak soon. Hopefully live.